there and talk? And he couldn't walk? Or, of course not. This was all in God's provision. Do I understand it? No, not completely. Why God would break the silence and speak it to only one man and then shut him up. You think about that. Now, I'm not proposing that with an answer to it. I don't completely understand it myself, but it's amazing that God did what He did. And if I were to conjecture or to take a shot at it all, I would say that it just added to the mystery of what happened in the temple, which may have caused people to pay more attention to what happened. And then as he began to write it on a writing tablet or something, they began to consider, and then everybody else began to spread the news. Maybe it got out farther and quicker that way. I do not know. But God shut him down or Gabriel shut him down because of his lapse in faith or his lapse in belief. But let's see what happens. Boy, the story gets even more interesting from here. Let's go on. In verse number 23, and it came to pass that as soon as the days of his ministration were accomplished, he departed to his own house. Now, remember, he lives in the south of Judea, in the wilderness area, in the hills of southern Judah. It's a wasteland. It's a very barren area. It's a place of shepherds and sheep, because only the goats and the sheep can manage in such a terrain. And there are villages, but it's a very, very barren area. It's a wilderness area. It's part of the area where David fled when Saul was chasing him down there in En-Gedi. And it's barren lands with caves and rocks and hills and not a lot of trees and grass. And so it's a wasteland. I've said that 2 or 3 times. And that's what it is. And they live down in that area, probably in a little valley where there is a well, where there is some trees, but they're surrounded by some pretty barren country. In verse 24, and after those days his wife Elizabeth conceived and hid herself 5 months. So he goes home and he shares with Elizabeth, and of course he has to write it all out or learn sign language, and he shares with Elizabeth what has happened. And so they come together and she conceives. Now here she is, an older woman. The Bible doesn't say how old, but it says that apparently old enough to make this a real miracle type of birth situation. And she has been barren her whole married life, and now she can have a child. And what's interesting is that now that she can have a child, what does she do? Now that her reproach is removed and she is with child, the Bible says that she hides herself for 5 months. And she says this, verse 25, thus hath the Lord dealt with me in the days wherein He looked on me to take away my reproach among men. All right? Now that's all she says. Now I'd like to just talk about that for just a moment. The fact is that here she is, an older woman now, way past childbearing years, and the moment she conceives, rather than running out and screaming it to all her friends and neighbors, what does she do? She gets real quiet about it and she hides herself. She doesn't want people to know. Again, why does she do that? And I think the Bible gives us these details for a reason, and I do not speculate to know the answers perfectly. I would suggest one reason might be that she has wanted to have a baby so long, and she's felt for so long the bitterness of barrenness, that finally, when she is pregnant, there are 2 things on her mind. I'm old. Can I carry this baby to term? And so I must be careful and make sure I do everything right. And number 2, she wants to enjoy for herself every moment what she has never been able to enjoy. And she is, in a way, selfishly coveting that time just to enjoy her pregnancy. I do not know, because I'm not a woman. I do not think like a woman. I can assure you I do not think like a woman. I never will think like a woman. That's not an insult. That's just pointing out the fact that women are women and men are men, and they do not think alike. They think altogether differently. Some of you ladies, and by the way, I would open it up for discussion this morning. Would anybody like to venture? Could you give us a woman's perspective on why Elizabeth hid herself 5 months? What do you think? Yeah. Right? Okay. Anybody else? Well, she hid herself for 5 months. And now let's see where the narrative takes us. Now we're going to Mary. Verse 26. And in the 6th month, the angel Gabriel was sent from God into a city of Galilee named Nazareth. Okay, stop right there. Remember that Micah has told us that Christ would be, of course, born in Bethlehem because he was the lineage and the house of who? David. All right? Now, I want to note 2 important things here. Number one, when God looked for someone to raise John the Baptist, He went clear down in the wasteland of Judea into one of a dirty little village and found 2 old super seniors to raise the greatest man ever born of a woman, as Jesus called him. And then, when it was time for God's Son, God's only Son to enter the world, being born of a woman, He went to the second worst place, and that's Nazareth, the armpit of the country, because the good Jews of Israel thought that all the people up in Galilee were kind of liberal and on the wrong side of the tracks. And in fact, the Jewish leaders said of Christ later, when someone mentioned where He's from, they said this, can any good thing come out of where? Nazareth. You see, the way God sees things and the way people see things are 2 different things oftentimes. And so, God wasn't looking for people to fit the bill politically right or economically right. He was looking for people that were spiritually right, I guess you'd say. And by the way, none of us are spiritually right. We're all in process. We're all desiring. We're all striving. We all want to honor God with our lives. Right? I trust we do. I trust that's why we're here. But in Nazareth, God found this little lady who was of the lineage and house of David, and her name was Mary. And He tapped her shoulder to have the greatest responsibility, and I would add to that privilege, but boy, it was a difficult task to raise the Son of God. And so He sends Gabriel 6 months later, after His announcement, or 6 months, maybe a little more. It'd be in the 6th month of Elizabeth's pregnancy. Is the time frame we're looking at, because we're all factoring off Elizabeth's pregnancy here. He sends him to Nazareth to a virgin espoused to a man whose name was Joseph, of the house of David. And the virgin's name was Mary. And the angel came in unto her and said, Hail, thou that art highly favored, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women. And when she saw him, she was troubled at his saying, and cast in her mind what manner of salutation this should be. And the angel said unto her, Fear not, Mary, for thou hast found favor with God. Again, I'd like to stop and make note. Every instance that we take note of that an angel either appears in person or in a dream, a direct emissary from the very throne of heaven, coming to the characters of Christmas, do you know the common thread woven into all 3 of those incidents, all right, is these 2 words, fear not. Fear not. God said to Zacharias, when Zacharias was troubled and he saw the angels, fear not. When the angel appeared to Mary, the same angel, and she's troubled, the angel said, fear not. When Joseph fell asleep pondering what he was going to do to Mary and decided to put her away privately, and an angel came to him in a vision and told him and said, fear not to take unto thee Mary thy wife, you know. I want to point out that every time we consider a child of God in the presence of God, it is accompanied by fear not. In other words, we are to know